Ang Hin Kee.
Mr. I declare my interest as an advisor to the taxi union and the private hire drivers union. Taxi driver pay daily rental of over $100 a day for the vehicle they rent, and operation costs have also risen. Even car wash costs more today. This is before the latest diesel tax hike and potential future GST increases. The situation is made more dire because of stiff competition from private hire cars. On the road today, there are 2 private hire cars to 1 taxi. An alarming jump considering that 5 years ago we had 28,500 taxis and no private hire cars. Today, we only have 20,000 taxis on the road. I've raised this suggestion some years back. Will the ministry consider a review or waiver for the GST that is levied on the daily rental of taxis that are borne by taxi drivers? Finance Minister Taman back then had replied to my suggestion that one way is to get the taxi drivers to register for GST, which would then allow them to charge customers for GST and they do the claims later. However, this is not a feasible solution since fares are set by their respective taxi operators. If waiver of GST on the daily rental of taxis through this channel is not viable, perhaps the government can consider other options so that the drivers can claim back the GST paid on the rental of the vehicle that they lease from the taxi operator. Secondly, the reduction of the annual special tax for diesel taxi by $850 helped manage part of the cost increase. With 15,100 taxis running on diesel, the taxi drivers have shared with me that they may need to drive longer hours and longer distance to cover the higher diesel tax. That defeats the purpose of trying to cut down the use of diesel. But because of the cost increase and you can't pass on the cost, they need to drive longer hours. The rental costs of hybrid taxis are also not viable. Those are about $20 more expensive than the diesel-driven taxis per day. So with 65,000 taxis and private hire cars on the road, the size of the daily hired trips only increased marginally from about 1 million when we had 28,000 taxis to slightly over 1.2 million currently, meaning that the number of commuting public that took either taxi or private hire cars did not grow in tandem with the growth in total vehicles serving them. Perhaps in terms of the size of the MRT lines and the buses that we provided, the commuting size didn't grow as much for taxi and private hire cars. One way I mentioned earlier during my budget debate is to encourage operators to reduce rental for hybrid taxis or find a better booking system that reduces empty cruising for the taxi drivers, or perhaps even consider reducing the pump price at their pump stations so that taxi drivers can manage the increase in diesel tax. I hope the government agencies that issue licenses operating to them or gives permit to them to operate will ensure that everyone, not just the taxi drivers and the government, co-share the burden of diesel-generated pollution. Sir, I had earlier also suggested that if the incumbents are not willing to do so, perhaps government can consider letting the taxi union run such pump licenses so that we can charge a lower fees to the drivers. Even private hire drivers have told me that they are also in this dilemma because some of them use diesel vehicles. I hope the licensing authority like LTA can track what is the size of the diesel fleet under private hire services. Perhaps we should have no new private hire cars that use diesel vehicles because that is not going to help us solve the problem but increase the size of the problem. Finally, the private hire car drivers would suggest that can they be given a higher percentage of tax deductible of 80% instead of the current 60% to deal with the higher diesel tax. Thank you.